but every now and then somebody would get killed, and I remember one dude, they gave him a shot of dope, and he slammed it, and when he slammed it, dude, ran a piece in his neck, and I heard his head flopped over backwards. Pretty brutal.
Was it over a drug debt then?
Kinda, you know. He was, yeah. I guess he owed some money to somebody. And then there was this little Pisek guy down in the first tier, and this big dude my size, black dude, took his shit. He's like, hey, give me my shit back. The guy's like, fuck you. And so he went and got a piece, stabbed him, killed him. And that's, they had I was there about 4.5 years. They had, I don't know, 7 or 8 murders. So there wasn't a lot of violence there, but when there was violence, it was usually a killing. Yeah, I spent 38 years, 6 months, couple weeks, and change.
You served almost 40 years, didn't you?
Yeah, I spent 38 years, 6 months, couple weeks, and change.
Did you hear that? So Mitch spent almost 40 years in, I believe, the California state prison system.
Right.
He has his own channel, Hard Intentions. The link will be in the description box below this video if you want to go and check out what he's doing over there and subscribe. He's got loads of stories. He's been on The Damage Done, I think it was, with those young fellas, which was a good one, which I've been watching. Well, like I said, we are primarily interested in your story, Mitch. Almost 40 decades in the California state prison system.
Yeah.
And for the viewers here, Bruno was in the Arizona jail with me. He's been co-hosting with the American interviews, and his links are down there as well for his interviews. So, Mitch, if you could...
Bruno has a YouTube channel as well, or?
No, he's done some interviews on my channel.
All right.
Yeah.
So that was Arizona. That was a federal prison?
State.
Oh, state. All right.
Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I have. Mr. Pink Underwear.
Yeah. Mitch,
got a lot of experience with pink underwear.
Yeah.
Mitch, how did your journey into the incarceration system begin?
Well, it doesn't always start with your crime. It starts, way before that. I went to prison when I was 17 years old. So I didn't just wake up at 17 and go, hey, I'm going to go commit some crimes, go to prison. I grew up in a pretty shitty environment. And, basically I had a stepdad who was an alcoholic, a Korean War veteran, and a roofer. And, he was a pretty rough dude, kind of abusive, alcoholic. So I grew up in San Diego, California. When you have a shitty home life, you look for like family connections outside of the house, and I grew up in a town called Lakeside in San Diego, California. It's kind of rough and tumble. They have an Indian reservation there, and they have a rodeo there still every year. And so it was like cowboys and Indians and bikers, and I gravitated towards biker style, people, and violence and crime, and substance abuse was kind of normal. So that led me up to I went to youth authority a couple times. I think I got to youth authority when I was 13. I did a couple years. I stayed out for about 4 months, and I went back for a year, for violence. And then I stayed out of youth authority about a year, and I got my life sentence. So
could you tell me a little bit about the youth authority and how the time was in there? I heard that in the California system, the youth authority is probably harder than the county jails. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey in there?
Yeah, well, youth authority to me was It wasn't as deadly, but it was more violent in prison because you fight. All the time. 1974, it was kind of the end of the whole, Black Power movement from the 60s and all that. And so and it was the beginning of the black gangs we're all familiar with now, the Crips and the Bloods and all that. They were just kind of starting to take off and you go to a unit. I remember being on a unit with 4 or 5 white guys and 35, 40 blacks, about 30 blacks, 15, 20, Mexicans. And so it was like, we it was rough. A lot of fighting, a lot of getting rat packed and all that kind of shit. So, so the violence that you grow up around on the street, fighting tough guy shit, whatever, just carried on into youth authority, and it was just like everyone's young and trying to prove their whatever, trying to make their self known for being tough or whatever. I mean, and then the guys that are, I hadn't had any experience with gangs really, I mean, I grew up around motorcycle clubs and all that stuff. I never really considered that gang stuff, So that was my first exposure to gangs, Hispanic gangs, black gangs. I was like, wow, that's it was a new experience, and it was, at first it's kind of, be lying to yourself if you say it's not frightening, because you're a young kid and you're around guys that are in there. I had never really been around guys that I knew that were killing people, so I'm around guys that are my age, a little older, and they're in there for murder and robberies and all kinds of shit that I'd never, been exposed to really. And I was a big kid, I was tall, so I was on the unit with older guys. So here I am, 13 years old, and I'm on a unit with guys that are 17, 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, so yeah, I was.
What was it like inside though? The layout? Was it dorms? Was it cells?
Yeah, it was dorm living. I was in Nellis, Fred C. Nellis. It's in Whittier, California. And I had a back then they give indeterminate sentences pretty much in youth authority in prison. And so I had a 6 months to 9 month sentence. It was called a board referral. And about 6 months in, some dudes had broke into a little canteen on the unit and then blamed it on me. And they're like, yeah, we're going to give you 6 more months. And, when you're young like that, that's a long time, So a friend of mine and I decided we were going to escape. And so I got a rope. It's a dorm with, big dorm, bathroom, day room, And so I had a chessboard that they made in the wood shop. It was about, I don't know, inch and a half thick. And so we decided we're going to knock this night man out and take his keys, big, escape plan. And so the guy's walking, he walked down the center of the dorm and then back, and so as he's walking back, I was getting out of bed to beat on him. And he goes, what are you doing? He was Iranian, and he had an accent. He goes, what are you doing, Smiley? And I go, I'm just putting his chessboard away. Because he got a bed and a locker and a bed and a locker, And so and as soon as he turned around, I beat him with a chessboard. I hit him about 3 good times. The chessboard broke. And I went to the locker to grab the rope. And I turned around and he was in the office. I didn't knock him out. So, but I remember looking in the office and he had blood coming down, and he said, get Smiley, And so I hopped in bed, and pretended like I'm sleeping. Of course, here come all the other staff. And so I got, I think they gave me like 4 extra years for that. And later on, I got busted with some contraband, and when you get a write up, you know, disciplinary, they give you more time. So the disciplinary officer goes, you know, you've already picked up like 4 years. You came in here with a 6 to 9 month sentence, and I don't want to give you any more time. So they had to send me in front of the board, the parole board, you know, because they were breaking it's called the table of sanctions, whatever. I don't know. They're breaking the standard, you know, on time. So I went in there and I thought it was kind of weird because they were asking me a bunch of questions about the streets and this and that. And, you know, and I stepped out and they came back in and they go, you know, you came in here, you've been here a couple years. And they decided they were going to let me out. They go, we don't want you to become institutionalized. We're going to release you. And I was like, wow. And they also decided to transfer me to another institution. So because they were correct, you know, staff were pretty upset that they were going to let me out after I had assaulted the staff member. And so I went up north to OH Close, which is in Stockton, and it's Northern California. And, you know, it didn't work out. You know, it was a pretty mellow place, but I had spent a couple of years in a pretty violent place. And so now, you know, violence is the norm, you know. And so I got in a couple fights there. I remember, you know, one guy they were saying was an informant, and I caught him in the day room and smacked him in the head with, you know, they had a pool table, so I beat him in the head with a pool ball, you know, and turned out the guy saying he was told on me. So they took my release date for 6 months and sent me to a place called Paso Robles, which is in Central California. And so now I'm like 15, something like that. And so I get there, and you know, now I'm just I'm mad because I lost my release date, you know. And I had a homeboy there, Ricky Grace from San Diego, and some guys are kind of campaigning against him. And you know, he had beat some guy up and it was their friend. Ricky was kind of wild, you know, he'd gone through the same places I'd gone through. And so I remember going through the chow line, and one of the dudes I heard that was going to jump on my homeboy, I told him, man, if you fuck with my homeboy, I'm going to stab you. And so now I've gone from, you know, I'm going to fight, learning how to fight, getting rat packed by, you know, black gangs and whatever. And, you know, so now I'm like, you know, I'll stab you. I mean, that's it, you know, looking back, it's a progression, you know, it becomes, once the violence becomes normal, it just progresses, you know. So they came and got me a few days later and took me to the hole. They had a program side and an ad seg side, kind of. And I finished my last 6 months there in the hole. And the day before I was released, the Protestant chaplain came down and he goes, I'm the one that had you put in here. And he goes, some of the guys came to him and told him, you know, that I had threatened them. And he looked at my file and seen I had done all this time. And he goes, I didn't want you to get any more time. I wanted you to go home. And I knew if I had you put in here, you would go. But I mean, I got in a few fights in there too, you know. But so I ended up getting released like 1976. Yeah.
So how did that work out for you? I know, you know, moving forward in the 80s and the 90s, you know, being from Southern California, moving you to Central California, Northern California, did the gangs, you know, bother you very much? Was it, you know, did they have that hierarchy, that set where this gang ran this? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
You know, and there were really no white gangs. You know, you had guys walking around saying they were Nazis and tattooing white power on them and all that kind of shit. But I mean, there was no real organized gangs, you know. The only gangs like in Nellis were black gangs. I remember we used to there was a gang, like mostly Crips, you know. And so the Pyrus back then, the Bloods, they had their own unit. The whole place, every unit was full of Crips except this one unit. And but we had this one dude on my unit who was a Pyru. And I remember one day we were sitting there, like 3 white dudes. Here come like 6 or 8, these Crips, and they're with the stupid questions, and I'm just thinking, fuck, here we go. And this Pyru guy, who I ran into in prison later on, he walked up, he looks at us, he looks at them, and he goes, say, man, leave these white boys alone. They ain't done nothing to you. And they kind of looked at him stupid, and he goes, you heard what I said. And they just walked away. So I was kind of I was kind of blown away by that, But there were white dudes in Nellis that I ran into in prison, from Oildale, different parts of the state. They were pretty tough, I mean, it bred a certain thing in you, and but when I went to OA's close, I couldn't believe how mellow it was. It was totally different. There were no Crips, no Bloods. One of the Crips had gone there also that I was in Nellis with. There was no real gang activity. It was a pretty mellow place, But Paso Robles, I didn't really experience the same thing. Mostly black gangs, like neighborhoods, But yeah, it was definitely an eye-opening experience as a young kid, I mean, to get thrown in that, growing up, not being around that, it was kind of an eye-opener. And plus, like, drugs for me was just like weed, LSD, drinking. So now I'm running into guys as I got older, they're into like heroin, and I'm like, oh, whatever. But yeah, so I got out of there, and I was full of I was pretty full of anger, really. And by then, my mom and dad had separated, my stepdad and my mom. And I had met this guy I thought was my dad, supposed to be my dad. That didn't work out. He lived in Montana. But yeah, so here I am after doing a couple of 2.5 years in youth authority, and I'm just like, I felt like I had been fucked over, by the state and also by family, having an asshole stepdad. And my whole thing was, I got kicked out of, I went to school for a while. I went to continuation school, and I got kicked out of there. I think I body slammed the principal. They were kind of checking me. They thought I was loaded. And I body slammed them. They kicked me out, So I'm hanging out selling weed, drinking, and got a motorcycle. And it was all downhill from there. I remember a friend of mine and I were in this place. It was because I was underage, so I had like a pool hall kind of thing. And we got in a fight with these 2 guys that were a little older, like 19, 20. They're college guys, and fucked them up pretty bad, over 25 fucking cents. Yeah, you play a game of foosball, and my partner goes, hey, let's go, you match a quarter. We put in a quarter, play a game, you put in a quarter, play a game, whatever. And it was 4th of July. I was been drinking and smoking weed all day, and my friend goes, hey, they didn't match our quarter. Let's go fuck them up. I'm like, that's an excuse to fuck someone up, so that got me arrested. About a week later, I got arrested, and they sent me back to youth authority for a year. And but while I was out, I had been several fights. In that same pool hall, I had a friend that was a little older, a little skinny guy, homeboy of mine. He had borrowed $50 from some guys, paid him back. They were biker dudes. From a different area than I was associated with. And so they were like sweating him for some extra money. And guy's a grown man, you know, he's probably late 20s. And so he came back that night like to collect his cash from my homeboy, and I beat him down pretty bad. I had him on the concrete, smashing his head in the ground, and you know, someone pulled me off and said that's enough. And I remember him, you know, saying, "Yeah, when I get my head right, I'm gonna come back with my brothers." And I told him, "Well, you know, go tell your brothers you got your ass kicked by a 15-year-old kid." You know, I mean, you know, you feel like you get a little prestige because you're tough and you can fight and all that bullshit, you know. So anyway, I went back to youth. I went to Preston, you know, and they call that the White House because it's in Northern California. It's in Ione, California. It's outside of Sacramento. And I actually had family that lived in the town that this place was. But so I went there. Preston was a different ball game. I remember guys had the White Power newspaper, and you know, all the white guys were like, you know, and I went there, I was 16, and I was on a unit, supposedly, I guess was like, you know, the hard unit, you know. And there were guys from Northern California, guys from Southern California. I'm a big kid, and yeah, I'm young, but I've been through a lot of shit already. So some of the guys are saying, no, he should go up on the hill, which is dorm living, easier environment. And the other guys are like, well, you know, they didn't want me to leave. So they have a thing, you know, like you go chest, you know, like it's like fighting, but just hit each other in the chest. And they go, hey, you know how to go chest? They're fucking with me, like getting me, like asking me stupid questions and like grilling you, you know. And so I'm getting a little upset. And so they had me go chess with this guy they called Elvis because he played a guitar and shit. And he was kind of yoked up. And I remember I put welts all over his chest, and I accidentally hit him in the mouth a couple times. And I remember this guy, Louis from San Fernando Valley, come up, put his arm around me and goes, so you guys still want him to leave? And so that settled that, you know, but you know, I'm around guys that are older. They're getting letters from San Quentin, from guys that had paroled from Preston, got out, got a beef, and had gone to. So these guys just paroled a few months prior to me getting there. Now they're in San Quentin. They're getting letters, you know, and it's like, you know, it's all glamorous, you know, oh, homeboys at San Quentin, you know, and we were getting, this is 77, 78. So we were getting letters also from PVI, which is Tracy, California. And so Tracy had the northern Hispanic gangs there, and black gangs, you know, and they were killing white dudes pretty regular. And so one of my friend's brothers was there. A guy I knew in youth authority was there. We're getting letters like it was a fucking nightmare, you know. And so you start developing I don't want to say a hatred, but you know, you start developing this thing like us and them, you know, like we're us and that's them. And also we had northern Mexicans and southern Mexicans in the same place. I'd never experienced that before. And I remember, you know, I was a fuck up. I was always in trouble. But one of the last things I did, it got me sent. They also had a hole there. Tamarack, they had a lockup side and a program side. And this guy knew had a cherry bomb, and he slid it over to me. Hey, check this out. And I go, cool. So I was in my cell, and they come down and pick up the mail. You slide your mail out under your door, and the cop, you know, the counselor or whatever, bends over, picks it up. So I lit that cherry bomb and slid out in the hallway. It was pretty loud. And I did it right when he was picking up the mail. And yeah, they freaked the fuck out, you know. And they said I tried to blow him up and all kinds of shit. So they sent me over to Tamarack, which is that's the hole. And then so for a white dudes to go to Tamarack, you kind of had to be invited over there. Couldn't just go over there. And so I was in the hole for about a month. And then they go, hey, once you come over to the program side, I'm like, all right. So we went over there, and I only had a few months left. You know, it was all about handball weights. We ate good. It was cool. They had and they were programming the whites were out all day. There was only a couple blacks. They were out all day, and they would program the Southerners in the morning, Northerners in the afternoon. You know, and then they decided that they were going to program the Northerners and the Southerners together. And one of the Southerners I was pretty cool with because he was tattooing, you know, and I was getting into tattooing and drawing, and he was from Compton, 155th, and he was a cool ass dude. But that's when I really seen like knives and so you know we kind of sided up with the Southerners, and because there was only a couple of them, we were holding their pieces for them, made sure they had knives, and so they let the Northerners out. And I remember my friend that was a tattoo guy. I remember him sliding up on one of them dudes, and he says, "This isn't going to work. You know, this isn't happening." And about 2 days later, well, prior to this, so right after they let him out and all that, we went over to chapel on Sunday, and on the way back, we jumped on some guy and beat him down. I didn't know it was going to be 3-on-1, but so they locked me up. And I had like a month left, and so they locked me up for my last 30 days. So right after I got locked up, the Northerners and Southerners went at it, and they looked like a little 38, and but it's got 4 bullets in it with a plug in the end. So when the tear gas pellet comes out, so you know, Preston was like the end of the road for youth authority. It was like once you hit a certain age, it was all older guys, you know, and it was pretty much guys that had been through youth authority or came in as, you know, at an elderly for youth authority. And then so the next step was Tracy, which was DVI. And at the time, you know, like I said, we were getting letters from guys in Tracy, and you know, the white guys were pretty thin there, and they were you know, victimized pretty much by the Northern Hispanic prison gang and the black prison gangs. You know, they were killing white dudes on a pretty regular basis and preying on them. So it was they threatened to send me there. They're like, yeah, we're going to send you to Tracy. Well, I was a juvenile commitment. You have to be an adult commitment to go to Tracy. So they would have had to take me back to court. I think it was called under 1800, some penal code, and then they could have sent me there. But I only had a few months left, so I just kind of laughed at them, you know. And I took everything kind of lightly, really, and I probably shouldn't have, you know. But you know, because I knew they couldn't send me to Tracy, but I had friends there, and it was, you know, it was pretty crazy. You know, DVI was created. The Dual family donated that land to the state to build a prison for young adults to learn vocational training. And there was supposed to be no guns inside the prison, you know, in the housing units, and they had to maintain a certain amount of trades and all that stuff. And so it was predominantly young guys there, you know. Anyway, I paroled from there. I stayed out about almost a year. Then I got a case that got me a life sentence. But so I paroled with all this new, you know, information and anger and, you know, just hostility, and you know, you're living around violence now. And you know, I actually saw my first stabbing in jail in Preston. I remember one day I was going to chow, and this guy went up behind these Northerners. He was a Southerner. And he stabbed one of them, stabbed the other guy, he stabbed two guys, and he chased another guy around the building with the knife and stabbed him around the back of the building. And then, yeah, Leo, it was quite a sight, you know.
When you see something like that, what's going through your head?
Well, I was just like, wow, you know, this is serious shit, you know. But you know, I was 16, and these guys are like early 20s, you know, and I had been around violence, so you know, you normalize it. You're already normalized violence, and so now you have to act like it doesn't bother you, and then you develop a thing where it really doesn't bother you. You know, it's kind of a progression.
Does it make you want to get a shank?
We had knives. White guys had knives, you know, but you know, then we had a riot in the chow hall. This is before I went over to Tamarack.
What was the riot over?
They had a Muhammad Ali fight, and they were yelling out the windows, you know, because everybody had radios and stuff, and some white dude had words with some of the blacks, and that was on the other side of the unit, so I didn't really know about it. So when we came out to go to chow, you know, it just kicked off with the blacks over just yelling out the windows, talking shit, you know, and guys being young and wanting to prove how big their nuts are, you know, I guess. But so I seen this stuff, and when I paroled, yeah, I took that with me to the street, you know, and I didn't really have any direction, you know, because I was a fuck up. You know, they had trades at Preston. It's Preston School of Industry, PSI they call it. But they had all kinds of vocational training there, but I couldn't go there because I was a fuck up. They have these bullshit I don't know what you would call them, like behavior modification programs. They were experimenting with all that stuff on guys in youth authority. And so they have point systems and, you know, good, bad. And if you're good, you get to go to the vocational area. And so I couldn't go, you know, so I didn't learn anything other than, you know, bullshit violence and, you know, learn a little bit more about drugs and drug sales. And yeah, you learn about crime, you know, because you're not doing anything else with yourself. You know, if they would have let me go up to the vocational area, I might have picked up some knowledge on, you know, vocational stuff. I might have got a job when I got up. I had no direction really. You know, I got a motorcycle and started hanging around guys that ride bikes, you know, and got introduced to crank. And you know, prior to that was just weed and, you know, pills, drinking. So now I get introduced to crank, and I'm like, you know, wow, it's without really understanding how strong it was, how powerful it was. I remember I had a homegirl before I went to prison. She was pretty good looking, and she had tons of turquoise jewelry. I mean, tons of it. And when I got out, I'm like, what happened to all your turquoise? And she had hawked it all for crank, you know. It was all gone, and I didn't really make the connection, you know.
For the viewers in England, Mitch, could you just explain what crank is?
That's, you know, methamphetamine. So now they just call it meth, and it's not really the same. You know, back then it was made right here in California, so now it's made across the border in Mexico. It's pretty nasty.
So it was a different recipe back then. Was it like the biker recipe?
Yeah, biker shit. You know, bikers kind of controlled the crank scene, you know, and it was kind of like there was money in it for the guys up top, you know, and there was money in it all the way down the food chain, but it was kind of like a party, you know, it was a party drug. And I was talking to somebody about that this past weekend, you know, it was a party. You could stay up for a few days or a few weeks and then, you know, take some pills, go to sleep, you know, or drink some whiskey, go to sleep and get up and you're okay, you know. But
when I was introduced to crystal meth in Phoenix, I was in my 20s and I just felt superhuman. I had all this energy. I didn't need to sleep. I didn't need to eat. That's how it started out, at least. Did you feel similar?
Yeah, I just felt like, man, you just feel like you're on top of the world, and you get all these thoughts going through your head on how you can do things, make money, and everybody's kind of chatty, and yeah, it was cool. But I mean, we had, we'd come up with schemes, and I started, buying guns and jewelry, and to finance I made some money, but mostly it was just to support my daily life and to keep the crank flowing.
What were the gun laws like in California back then?
You couldn't have guns. If you're an ex-felon, you couldn't have guns. I couldn't have a gun. But one of my connections would take guns down to Mexico and sell them. Mexico didn't have the weapons they have now, like the cartels and all that stuff. So, I mean, they would take single shot 22 rifles down there and sell them. Any gun you could get, they would take it. So
it was easy getting them into Mexico. Is it coming out that they search you?
I don't know. Evidently, she had a route, to get down there. So, so I would just buy up guns from guys that wanted to get loaded on that crank, and take them to the connection, and that's how that went. So now I'm around. And when you stay up for an extended length of time, it starts to change your personality, and you start accepting things like, I got involved in some violence here and there, carrying a knife, having a gun available, and without really realizing, that, hey, these weapons are for hurting people and possibly killing people. And, it's just something you do. You carry a knife, and you get in a problem, you use it. Or if you've got a gun, someone fucks you around real bad, or you feel like your life's in danger, you got a gun, you'll use it. And when you're up for extended period of time without sleep, it makes it, you're vulnerable to split, spree of the moment reaction, and none of that stuff ever crossed my mind when I was out there living like that. I mean, I turned 17 years old. I was still a kid. And, I was hanging around guys that were bikers and guys that I admired growing up in my neighborhood. Now I'm starting to get older. And, I remember one of the things was, some of them guys see me using the crank and all that shit. And they're like, whatever you do, don't fucking shoot dope. You turn yourself into a fucking dope fiend. We catch you shooting dope, will break your fucking arm, shit like that. That was a no-no, guys that shoot dope. Back then, the philosophy was, if you shoot dope, you're weak, and you will tell, and whatever. And I think that comes from guys in the past that were shooting dope, and they did turn informant, So that's kind of where that philosophy came from, But I was headed for a wreck, and a lot of my homeboys. I had a crew of guys that I grew up with, where I was like the youngest guy in the crew. The oldest guy might have been 24, 25. They all had motorcycles. I had a motorcycle. They were into customizing bikes and, making choppers. Everybody had choppers back then, the extended forks and custom paint jobs and all that shit. So that crew of guys would always tell me, man, bro, you got to slow down. You're headed for a wreck. We're worried you're going to get killed. You're going to go to prison. And I was just like, hey, I'm cool. I got this, I was like, hey, F this, I'm cool. I got it. So I started I started separating myself from them guys a little bit. And those are guys I grew up with. And I actually see one of them now. He lives close by. Yeah, and it's just like, I started hanging out more with a criminal element, because of the drugs, really. The crank, I mean, I smoked weed and I still take some pills once in a while, but it was mostly the crank, trying to figure out how to get more of it, how to sell more of it, Yeah, so.
Did you get paranoid off it? Because I started to get paranoid off it over time and seeing imaginary things if I've been awake for too long.
Yeah, I did, but I lived with my friend and his mom, and she was an old biker chick, you know. And I remember I got on the roof one time, and she's like, "What the fuck you doing up there?" I had been watching these cars drive by our house. We live kind of in a semi-rural area, you know. And she's like, and so I got on the roof and I watched this car, and she's like, "What the fuck you doing on the roof, Smiley? Get down from there," you know. And I said, "Man, these are cops watching us." And she's like, "You're crazy." So what happened was the car would drive around the block a couple times and then park, and it was a building like a muffler shop, right? Auto body or auto mechanic muffler shop. And then the guy would get out of the car and get in another car and then drive around the block, and that car would leave and they'd park. I seen it, you know, and I started looking real closely at it from the roof, and it was just a facade. It was a fake building. It had like half sides and a front. I was like, wow, you know, and so I told her, "Come on, let's go check this out, Carol." And I drove her by there and showed her. She was like, wow, you know, because my connection with the guns lived in the same neighborhood. So yeah, so I did get a little paranoid, but I got, you know, I got to realizing, hey, you know, they're watching us, you know. But and you know, like I got a life sentence for my crime, which so like violence was like no big deal, you know. You could do that out in the open, who gives a shit, right? Beat someone down. And eventually in this bar fight, you know, one of my co-defendants stabbed a guy and he died, and I got a life sentence. But when it came to the drug deal, I was like super paranoid, super, you know, guys would teach me shit like, you know, don't take money from people in front of other people. And just, I was really paranoid about selling dope. I didn't want to get caught selling dope. And I remember when I was in the county jail, I met this Mexican cat, you know, from Logan Heights. And he's like, yeah, he got caught with 3 ounces of heroin, with 3 pieces of heroin, you know. I go, so how much time you getting? He's out 5 years. I thought, man, that ain't shit. I'm in here facing a life sentence, you know, and this guy's only going to do 5 years. And back then you did 2/3 of your time with good time. I thought I could have been selling that dope just wide open and making a gang of money. And the worst thing that would have happened to me was I would have got 4 or 5 years.
What started the bar fight, Mitch?
You know, a guy came in, he was in a motorcycle club, and they really didn't get along with some of the guys I knew, and started talking shit. Words exchanged, and he, you know, he hit my co-defendant in the face with a beer pitcher, knocked him down. They were both 24 years old. I was 17, so you know, I jumped up, started punching the guy a few times, and the guy that got hit got up. They staggered out on the sidewalk, and I went out there, and the guy was on top of my co-defendant, you know, socking him up. So I started kicking the guy, you know, and then I started kind of stomping on him, and then the next thing I know, you know, he got stabbed. So
Wasn't there a self-defense element to that?
for me, I just wanted to kind of beat him down and get him up off my co-defendant, but you know, somebody else stabbed him during the course of that. So you know, we got busted. And they offered the guy who was getting beaten up, actually, and then me, they offered us a manslaughter, and they offered the other guy second-degree murder. It was a deal, but and so I would have got 6 years if I would have got a manslaughter. But it was a package deal. My lord, this is a package deal. All you guys have to take the deal, or there's no deal. And if one guy wants to take the deal and the other guys don't, then you have to get on the witness stand and say what your part in the crime was. Which my lawyer goes, you know, once you get on the witness stand, they can ask you whatever you want. And I was like, you know, there's no deal. You know, so we went to trial.
How many co-defendants were there?
Two. And we all got second-degree murder.
Oh shit.
So it's like I was guilty of aiding and abetting by vicarious liability. So I'm liable for the actions of the others because I was involved with the fight part of it, you know. But really, you know, like people don't understand. once you get accused of a crime like that, and you're going, if you don't take their deal and you go to trial, they pull out all the stops.
Hope you're enjoying this podcast. There's a word from our sponsor, Rocket Money. The other day, I had to cancel 3 Amazon Prime memberships. I had a personal on the UK Amazon, US Amazon, company account, US Amazon, UK Amazon. Do you understand how hard it is to cancel these bloody things? That's why Rocket Money makes these things so much easier, formerly known as Truebill. The app shows all your subscriptions in one place and cancels what you don't want for you. Rocket Money can even find subscriptions you didn't know you were paying for. Just like with me, with my 4 Amazon Prime memberships, you may find out you've been at least double charged for a subscription. To cancel a subscription, all you've got to do is press cancel and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/Sean, SHAUN. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/Sean, SHAUN. Thank you for supporting our sponsor, Rocket Money. Links in the description box. Cheers.
And if you get found guilty, you're going to get broke off as much as they can give you. But during the preliminary trial, all the witnesses, there was really nothing tying me to the murder part of it. And they questioned this one guy that I was living with, Eric, and he said, and they said, when did he come home and tell they stabbed this guy in a bike club? And he said they didn't say anything about a motorcycle club. They didn't say anything about a stabbing. All they said was that they came home and they got in a fight in a bar. So during the trial, the judge says, it's obvious this guy was involved with the stabbing aspect of the case, but these other 2 guys, all you prove is they got in a fight in a bar and they ran away before the cops got there. They got 2 days to prove they knew about the stabbing or they were involved with the stabbing. And so the only witness left was this guy, Eric. And so he comes on, my lawyer's like, you're good. You're going to beat this. And he gets on the witness stand and says that we came home and told them we stabbed a guy in a bike club. Right. So it just goes to show you, like, when you're accused of a crime, especially back then, they'll pull out all the stops to get you put in prison. They don't really care if you're innocent or guilty. And, proof of that is the Innocence Project here in the United States. They're getting guys out of prison all the time that are being proven innocent. And a friend of mine actually did 36 years and was proven innocent. So the circumstances of the case, they don't really care about. They'll fabricate information and do whatever it takes to get you behind bars. So they get a notch on their belt, for every conviction they get. So that's something for guys to think about, if they get in the mix, you're not only competing with other guys that are in the mix, you have to worry about law enforcement, and they're in the mix too. Law enforcement is in the mix, and they play by the same rules, but they have a little bit more juice than we do, right? So, they got the guns and the jails and the finances. So,
and they get people to say anything to drop the charges against other people. Yeah,
sure, yeah. So I got convicted, and I went to youth authority for a 90-day observation, which, my lawyer's like, you'll get a little reprieve before you go to prison, because I'm sure they're not going to accept you. So I went to youth authority for about 30 days actually, and they're like, yeah, we're not taking you.
Well, when that sentence came in, what was that day like for you?
I knew what it was coming, and but so I went and got sentenced, and then I saw my attorney after that, and I got 15 to life. So
that gave you hope. That gave you hope.
Well, your term is 15 years. And so you do 2/3 of that, then you're eligible for parole, and you go in front of the parole board. Because I had an indeterminate sentence, they have that life at the end of it. Whereas other guys, they get determinate sentences, they get a set term, So anyway, I told my lawyer, so I'm going to do 10 years. I was in the attorney room. I had a pack of cigarettes in my hand. I'm sitting, I'm kind of like, playing the role, like, whatever. And he goes, no, you're not going to do 10 years. He goes, you're going to be eligible for parole in 10 years. And then you're going to go in front of a parole board and they don't have to let you out. And I just thought about that for a minute. I remember I dropped that pack of cigarettes on the floor and I put my head down. I was like, man, because you know, I knew I was a screw up. You know, I was not your model prisoner. I was not going to be a model inmate. You know, and I just knew, you know, all right, it's going to be a long road. You know, so yeah. And so guys in the jail were saying, you know, when you go to prison, you can fuck up all you want. And then when you get about 5 years to board, then you start cleaning up your act, shows progress, this and that, you know. And I'm like, yeah, all right, whatever. Of course, the program changed, you know, during the course of my prison term. You know, it was, you know, you go to prison. I remember when I took you know, the bus to Chino, which is a reception center. And, you know, I talk about this on my channel. You know, I got there and I was 18 years old, you know, and they bring you in this dock. It's up off the ground. It's a dock. It's a loading dock, and it's got bars, and you go into R&R, and receiving and release, you know. And they put a trash can. Everyone's in a circle around this trash can. The cop tells you, take everything you got and put in that trash can. You're not supposed to take anything with you to prison from county jail. And I thought, man, you know, everything you got left from the county jail that came from the streets with you is going in that trash can. And so that's like the final, you know, shutting that door on the world. And now you're here and this is where you're going to be. I remember that feeling.
What year was that?
January of 1980, I think it was. Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty, you know, it was quite a deal, you know. And then, of course, you know, you got to put on your happy face, you know, your facade, you know, and, you know, people talk about, you know, their, you know, stone cold, whatever kind of personality, but I don't think anybody could go in that situation and not feel, you know, kind of, I don't know what the word would be. You got a little bit of fear and you got a little bit of hopelessness and all that kind of stuff in a big bundle, you know, but you can't, who do you talk to? Who do you say that to? Hey bro, you feel kind of hopeless? You know, I mean, nobody's gonna want to engage in that kind of conversation. They're all, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They all got their tough guy face on, you know. And so yeah, I went to my housing unit and I had a single cell. I was in a, you know, they put younger dudes, I guess. And they take me down to you know, they do an assessment on your education, your psychological stuff, all that stuff there. And they have inmates doing these, you know, the testing and whatnot. They're like, you're going to be in here for 3 days. And I'm like, dude, I just spent a year in a county jail. I don't want to be in here for 3 days. I want to go to the yard, play handball, and lift weights. You know, so I told me, screw this, I'm cool. So this sergeant put me in another unit that had just been coming off lockdown for a racial stabbing. They're still on lockdown, slowly letting them out. And, you know, I didn't last a couple weeks. I got in an altercation with somebody, went to the hole.
What was it over?
Just fat mouthing on a tear. You know, fuck this, fuck that, fuck the white boy, hey, white boy this, white boy that, you know, just standard shit that, you know, you're not supposed to put up with in my mind from youth authority. You know, in youth authority, the whites are like, hey, the whites are for the whites. You know, that's how it was. And you kind of think that's what it's going to be like in prison. And then, you know, later on you find out it's really not. So I got a stabbing there with the hole. later on, I got transferred up to San Quentin, and I did a few years in the shoe, which you see guys getting stabbed on a pretty regular basis, guys getting shot, mostly with a shotgun. They use 7.5 grain birdshot. That's why guys don't fight, really. Guys talk about no fighting policies and all that. Like, guys would fight, but mostly guys don't want to get shot, so they would stab you. If you stab a guy 2 or 3 times, that's the equivalent of a fist fight, because you can slide up on somebody and poke a few holes in them and keep moving without getting shot or caught. So that's kind of where the stabbing shit came from. And then there were guys that would stab people to try to kill them. You start seeing all this shit. And I remember one guy tried to escape. They put this dude on our yard, and I guess I found out later he was a nut, and the psych says, well, if he goes to the exercise yard, it'll be good for him to get some fresh air, And so me and these guys are working out in the corner, and then they have lunch. They bring out, they give you a cup of soup through the fence, and then a sandwich, and we eat lunch. And the whole yard, though, this guy was staring at us over in the corner, walking back and forth. I thought, what the fuck's up with that dude, And so I went over to the fence. When everybody eats, sometimes they'll give you extra soup or whatever, And the gun rail is right on top of us. And they just started shooting, and I look, and it was that dude, and he was climbing the fence, and they shot him off the fence, and he got back on the fence again, and they shot him with that Mini 14 and dropped him. It went in his shoulder, and it came out his other side by his hip bullet, because a Mini 14 bullet tumbles when it goes in you, It's designed, I guess, to tear your guts up, like if it goes in and hits a bone, it'll change direction and bounce around inside your body. But the dude lived. You see shit like that, stabbings, guys get killed, guys get shot. They have a gun rail, which is 15, 20 feet from the tier. They would shoot you right on the tier, with a shotgun. That's pretty close range. Seemed like guys were getting shot pretty much every day there, stabbed pretty much every day. It was a pretty violent prison. I think that was the most extreme violence I lived around my entire term, was there.
San Quentin.
Yeah. It's an old prison, The last building was, I think they finished building North Block in 1934. It opened in 1852, I think. But I mean, it was a prison ship, and then they started building. And
we've had a guy called John Abbott on. He's really popular on my channel, and he's told us all kinds of stories from San Quentin.
I've seen him. Yeah.
Whole different level of violent, raw survival.
Yeah.
Compared to like the modern industrial cameraed up prisons, it's just.
Yeah, well, the very first building the state of California ever built, when it became a state, part of the Union of the United States, was the dungeon at San Quentin. That's the first thing they ever built as a state, and it's still there. It's a historical monument. So I mean, that place is so old. There's so many blind spots, and the guys that work the gun rails, the guards, they're pretty good. They could see just about everything, and some of them guys could reload their shotgun while they were shooting it. I mean, it was just insane. And those guys that shot people on a regular basis, and some of them enjoyed it, they never worked on the ground. They worked on the gun rail exclusively, because guys developed a pretty severe hatred for them,
Were you there when Schwarzenegger came there?
No, I think I was in the hole. But I do have some of my friends were there. They worked out with him. I really got much love for Arnie. He was in Preston. He came to Preston when I was in Preston, and I seen him there. But in San Quentin, a couple of my friends were in the gym working out. He went and worked out with him for a few hours, and he was like, man, you guys do way too much time. And then when he became a governor, some of those guys were still in prison. and he took the hard, tough on crime shit that all his predecessors took. So kind of a hypocrite, you know, for his, once again, you know, guys take the route of, you know, follow the leader for their own success. So I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of hypocritical. And you know,
Did Johnny Cash ever go to Quentin?
They did not when I was there, but
Okay.
yeah. You know, Johnny Cash, well, it was before my time, but he actually funded the cable system in the prisons for our TVs. He gave up the money to put cable. You know, it goes to an antenna on the roof back then. You know, it's, you know, people think about cable. I mean, we don't even have cable now. We have internet stuff. So, yeah, Johnny Cash funded the cable system for the televisions. You could have a TV in your cell, so all that was funded by Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash was a decent guy, man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what was your routine in Quentin?
You know, you had yard every other day, so I would go to the yard, work out, come in, you know, take a bird bath or shower in the yard, and then catch a nap. I'd stay up all night drawing. You know, I had you had a single cell back then in the hole, so my bed's a cookie sheet. And back then they had hobby in the hole. You could order art supplies in the hole, all that stuff, you know. So I got into my drawing, you know, and I got into tattooing, tattooed on my legs and got, you know, pretty good at tattooing and drawing. And then the next day I'd sleep all day, stay up all night drawing in yard, you know. That was my routine. I just got into my artwork, read a few books, you know, but that was it.
So did the art and the tattooing, did that become your hustle?
Yeah, later on. I mean, at that time, I was just trying to learn how to draw and how to, you know, how to tattoo, and you know. And then I met this counselor. This counselor came on the tier. She goes, "Hi, I'm your new counselor," and she later on became the director of CDC. But I go, "So what?" You know, I'm like, "So what?" And you know, I've been in the hole for a while, and I'm like, you know. So she started talking to me, and she's like, I go, "Look, I want to get the fuck out of the hole." And she goes, "Give me a year clean and I'll get you out of the hole." I go, "Is your word good?" And she goes, "My word's good." So during that, I told some of my homeboys, "Hey, I'm going to try and, you know, get the fuck out of here. I got a life sentence. I got to go to board. I got to get out of the hole eventually." And so they're all right. Like, I don't really want to be involved in shit, you know. And I remember, you know, a couple of my homeboys from San Diego in the yard, and this, they brought a bunch of guys from Tracy, and I don't know much about them. And so some of the guys on my tier, on my yard, they had been at Tracy. And so I see this guy, he's a white dude, and I'm talking to him, "Yeah, what's up?" You know. Well, in Tracy, they had white dudes that would conspire against other white dudes for the NF, basically. I think they called them the New White Family or some shit. But yeah, I think they were just scared to death, you know. So if they heard white dude talking about plotting against somebody, you know, they would go and tell them guys, and then they'd stab the white dudes. Evidently, one of these guys came in my yard that was one of them. I didn't know because I hadn't been to Tracy yet, you know. I remember I'm sitting there on the curb eating, and my homeboy was on my right, and this guy's sitting next to me, and there's a gun rail right straight this way, you know. And my homeboy just leaned over me and started stabbing this dude. And I'm like, "What the fuck?" And I grabbed my sack lunch and my sandwich, and I walked over. You know, I got about 15 feet away, and they started shooting them, you know. I remember that dude walking off the yard, and he had a big shiny knife sticking out of his shoulder. But I said, "Hey, homeboy," later on, you know, when he came back to the yard, I found out that's why he had stabbed that guy. He was one of them dudes, you know. And I said, "Hey, homeboy, what the fuck, man? You could have got me shot." And he goes, and I was in youth authority with this guy, Joe, and he goes, "Well, shit, man, you said you didn't want to be involved anymore." And so, you know, we're just respecting your wishes. And I go, "Man, next time give me like a heads up, like 5-minute heads up, you know." Yeah, I mean, that was San Quentin, that was
Mm.
prison back then, really. And so my counselor, she goes, you've been in the hole for a while, nobody wants you. They came out with a point system. And so every time you get a write up, you get more points. You get points for the length of your term. And so 52 points is a level 4 and above. Well, I had like 164 points. I didn't know that at the time. And she's like, look, I put you up for Soledad a couple times and they don't want you. Tracy don't want you. So she goes, I'm going to get you sent to CMF for this. It's called the Security Housing Decompression Unit to kind of filter you back into a main line. You've been in the hole around all this violence, She goes, but if you go there, CMF's pretty laid back pen. They had all the lifer programs there, category T, category X. This was a category V. And she goes, if you go there and you fuck up, you're going to go back to level 4 and you're not going to get out for at least 10 years. You'll be in level 4. So think about it. And I go, all right, about a week later, I said, hey, run it. I'm good, And so, and I thought about it for a week and I go, this is a fucked up place to be. I got a shot, and fuck it. So I went there and they send you to the hole there. And then I got a job in the kitchen in the hole. You kind of work your way out to the main line. I got the main line there and it was wide open. I was in G3, which was almost all lifers. They had 5 dorms and then cells. And they put me in a dorm. It was a Friday. And this cop, Smitty, worked Friday and Saturday nights, and he just didn't give a fuck about nothing. It was a party. Like, his thing was basically no violence, So the front door was open. So guys were coming from other units, other floors. CMF is sectioned off in floors. Each floor is separate from the other. And I mean, I would just stand in the hallway, man, and guys' doors were open. Guys were in there smoking weed, drinking. It was just a fucking full-on party. And I was used to such a restricted environment. I was just like, wow, it kind of blew me away. I wasn't really paranoid, but I thought, man, this is fucking crazy, And yeah, I got into milling cabinet. I got into vocation there. Yeah, I went to the kitchen for a while. I mean, I never really had a real job in prison yet. And I mean, there was a lot of dope there, a lot of weed, crank, whatever you wanted. Guys are making wine. It's like prison's like a little city, and so there was some guys there that were bikers into the pen. This is it's like a vacation from hell being there, And everybody knows they're not going to be there for a long time. They got to do their little program and then go back to prison. But I met some guys there that some guys were bike clubs, some guys were just bikers, some guys were bikers that hung around bike clubs. And I was a kid, I think I was like 22, 23 maybe. And yeah, and I got in a little trouble, and I went to AdSeg for a minute, and yeah, so I met these guys. They're biker dudes. They're older than me. Some have been in prison since like 1970, now around 84, 85. And I got in a little trouble. Still kind of an asshole. Still young, and you live through that kind of violence and that kind of madness. I mean, people can say, whatever they want, like it didn't bother them and they're, but it does bother you and it didn't, and, you do normalize it and you kind of accept it as it's a reality of your environment, but it still bothers you. And it different people react. Some people isolate and become, they internalize everything, and some people act out, and I acted out. I didn't, instead of saying, hey, I really don't know how to handle this shit, I just acted like I could handle it, and just like everyone else does. And You know, I still had some crazy behaviors, you know, I got a little bit of trouble. And so these guys, you know, I remember I got out of AdSeg and there was a deputy warden there that had worked his way up from CO to deputy warden, and he kind of liked us. His name was Nyberg, Bill Nyberg. And so that all the guys on the main line there were called Nyberg's kids. So, you know, some of the guys I knew told him, hey, give a kid a chance. And he came down to see me. He goes, I'm gonna let you stay here. You got one chance. He was a short guy, bald head, older guy. And he goes, and if you fuck up, I'm gonna send you to a pit. You understand what I'm saying? I go, I do, you know. And I said, I gave you my word I'd be good, and I intend to keep it. So the pit, you know, is Folsom, you know, end of the world. And so his thing was just no violence and don't get caught with dope, you know, don't get caught with drugs and no violence. It was pretty easy to, you know, and the older guys that knew, you know, guys that became good friends with, you know, they're like, hey, what do you want to do? You know, you want to party and make money, or you want to be in and out of the hole all the time? I said, I want to party and make money. And so they taught me how to do that, and they taught me how to live, you know, in prison. And of course, the skills that they taught me as a young guy carried through even to this day, you know. And that's when I started focusing on getting a trade. I got in the milling cabinet. And then they had hobby shops where you could work with wood, jewelry, art, all that kind of stuff. So I would go down a hobby shop. You had to buy your own wood and all your own materials. And then they had a store out front where you could sell your products, you know. I started doing woodwork and doing my artwork, and I started tattooing pretty regular. You know, that prison was really wide open. They had yard unlocks every half hour. A lot of free movement. I would go from floor to floor, tattooing, sling a little bit of dope, you know, make some money. And then, like a lot of the money I'd made, I would flip it over into hobby, and I'd buy wood and different stuff and make products, sell them in a hobby store. And I thought, man, you know, selling jewelry boxes, you know, chessboards, all that kind of stuff, wooden toys, whatever, you know, I thought this is just like selling dope, but it's legal, you know. I mean, in prison, if you can make, you know, 4, 5, 10,000 bucks a year in prisons doing that, I mean, that was pretty good hustle, you know. And some guys made 10, 15 grand a year in hobby. It was, of course, they took all that away. But so I got in a groove there, and I went from one program to the next, and they had about 3 programs you could do as lifers, you know. And you know, while I was there, you know, I remember there was a few murders there. It was a pretty mellow prison. But every now and then somebody would get killed, you know. And you know, I remember one dude, they gave him a shot of dope, and you know, he slammed it, and when he slammed it, dude, you know, ran a piece in his neck, and I heard his head flopped over backwards. Pretty brutal, you know.
Was it over a drug debt then?
Kinda, you know. He was yeah, I guess he owed some money to somebody, you know. And then there was this little Pisek guy down in the first tier, and this big dude my size, black dude, took his shit, you know. He's like, hey, give me my shit back, you know. The guy's like, you know, fuck you. And so he went and got a piece, stabbed him, killed him, you know. I mean, that's they had about, say, I was there about 4.5 years. They had, I don't know, 7 or 8 murders, you know. So there wasn't a lot of violence there, but when there was violence, it was usually a killing, you know.
You mentioned the bikers then. So the bikers, did they have dual status in the Aryan Brotherhood?
No, that's not true. I heard that on your show, and you know, he was talking about one guy that was in Folsom, and I believe his name's Moose, and big guy, heavy set dude. I heard he could play handball like crazy. He used to hang around some guys in a club out of the Bay Area, Oakland, but he was never a member. I don't even think he was a prospect. And then, you know, I knew Rotten Richard. He mentioned that guy's name. Richard got kicked out of the club before he ever went to prison. He was not in the club when he was in prison, and he was not and those, you know, yeah, there's no dual status in a motorcycle club and a prison gang. There's no such thing. You're either one or the other. And actually, you know, guys in prison gangs usually back then they didn't really care much for bikers type guys, you know.
Hope you're enjoying the podcast. Here's a word from our sponsor, Harry's. Having such a scratchy face, I'm always delighted to get a new Harry's set. There's a foaming gel, hydrating night lotion, and the razor with the weighted handle really gets the job done. The trimmer blade makes it so easy to get into those tricky places to reach. The shave gel offers effective lubrication and just comes off like butter. It's such a smooth shave. It shaves fast, efficiently, no discomfort, and it is so smooth by the end. The hydrating night lotion is light and non-greasy. Harry's is doing a £0 trial. Start shaving with the products, just pay for delivery. Save every time. Save on all your shaving products without sacrificing quality. You're in control. You can modify or cancel your plan from the account page. Make sure to support our podcast and start your own skincare journey by redeeming a free Harry's trial set. All you cover is £3.95 for delivery. Just head to harrys.com/Sean, SHAUN, and have your trial set delivered to your door. That's harrys.com/Sean, SHAUN. Thank you for supporting our sponsor.
Some guys had, you know, respect or whatever, but you know, like some of my friends that were involved with the baseball bat incident, Tracy, they had a lot of respect for people over. You know, if you were in Tracy back then when the NF was killing white dudes and the BGF was killing white dudes, and you survived that, you know, them guys had a lot of respect coming for what they went through. But there's no dual membership in the prison gang and the motorcycle clubs. It's just no. But you know, bikers in prison, they don't aspire to spend the rest of their life in prison. I mean, and that's kind of something them dudes taught me. Like, you know, there's a time to get with it, and there's a time to relax and just, you know, like they said, you want to party and make money, you want to be in the fucking hole all the time, you know. And so, you know, our goal is to get out of prison, and you know, it's, you know, the motorcycle lifestyle is about freedom and you know, being an individual, respecting your other guys that are individuals. You know, that's what it's all about, man. So, you know,
Did you come across Doug the Thug?
now he left San Quentin before I got there. I didn't get the chance to meet him, but I have some friends that did, and yeah, he was quite a guy, quite a character, has quite a reputation, you know.
Have you got any Doug stories that you heard from those friends?
You know, I do have a friend. He went to prison pretty young, like me, and you know, he's evidently Doug had a couple ladies in the hospital that would you know, involved with some prostitution stuff, you know, and he was like, "Hey, youngster, you want some pussy?" You know,
Oh shit.
you know, he's kind of, you know, I can just picture him like, you know, he's like, I didn't know what to say, man. You know, he had it going on. You know, he's from the old school, and you know, prison back then you could have just about anything you wanted at that place, and he had things going on. So yeah, he was you know, I heard he was a stand-up dude, you know, he'd get with it, fight, whatever, do, you know, put up with no shit, all that. Um, yeah, but I never got a chance to meet him, unfortunately. A little bit before my day, you know.
So if it went
Right.
off with the other races, then everybody had to represent.
Sure. I mean, you know, it's not like you know, they say in war there's long periods of boredom interrupted by short spurts of violence. You know, prison's the same way. You know, you're always aware of what can happen at any time. I mean, all it takes is at the drop of a hat there could be something, you know, that could be life threatening, but for the most part, guys are going about their daily routine, doing their thing, you know. guys are working in the law library, guys are working in the dental lab, guys are working in plant operations, carpenter shop, guys are going to work, trade, trying to earn some money in industry and trying to hustle some food out of the kitchen, you know, so they could make some money, and everyone's doing their thing. And, you know, it's not like all the white guys work here and all the black guys work there and all the Mexicans work there. So everyone's working together. Everyone's around each other all the time. And so it's not like, you know, you don't go to work and be like, hey, fuck you guys. You know, I mean, you have to work with guys, you have to live around guys. And so for the most part, people get an understanding and they get along, you know. It's not like you're on.
Did any full scale race riots pop off?
Yeah, I remember I was in a hole. They had one in San Quentin that lasted quite a long time. With the Mexicans and the blacks, I guess it was pretty bad. But I mean, I've been in a few riots here and there, and it seemed like back in the day, Folsom and San Quentin were competing to see how many people they could kill each year, you know. But you know, I didn't. After '79, you know, pretty much right before I came to prison, they had a big thing in Folsom with the blacks and whites. But after that, things. My time in prison, I really didn't have a lot of problems with the blacks. You know, later on at Lancaster around the 2000, we started having some riots with the Southern Hispanics, Southern Mexicans. Would jump on the whites, you know, usually over drug debts some fucking guy owed, you know. But yeah, so I stayed in Vacaville, finished all the programs, and then I went back to San Quentin, and they're like, "Welcome to San Quentin. You're going to Folsom." So they were making San Quentin a level 2. You know, it's an antiquated prison, and they built a bunch of new prisons. You know, and I had gone to the parole board for the first time, and they said, you know, you didn't finish your milling cabinet trade, so we don't have any documentation that you can support yourself when you get out. So we want you to finish your milling cabinet trade. We want you to go to Tracy. And so I was like, you know, fuck Tracy. I want to go back to San Quentin. But I went there and they're like, you know, we're making it a level 2. You're out of here. And they sent me to New Folsom, end of '88, beginning of '89. And I went to B Yard, which is supposedly, you know, the asshole yard. Seems like everywhere I went after that, I always ended up on the asshole yard. But you know, the time I spent there around them guys in CMF, you know, I kind of came into my own, and I figured out how I was going to live in prison. And I was just gonna, that's how I was going to do it, you know. And so I got to New Folsom, and I mean, they had nothing. There was no hobby, no jobs, and all they had was a nice weight pile, you know. And I remember I met my friend David Marshall there, and I went out to the yard. They had emptied the shoe in the back, and that's where they put us. They sent them guys to Pelican Bay or whatever. And so David Marshall tells me, you play baseball? I'm like, yeah, I play softball, you know, whatever. And so we played the whites against the blacks, level 4, 180 yard, you know. We're playing softball. I look over there, and there's like a stack of sodas like 4 feet high, a couple stacked. They're gambling cases of sodas on a softball game. You know? That was pretty funny. But you know, by now I'm into making money and hobby, partying a little bit, and just I'm like, you know, family visits. I had gotten married in 1988, and you know, I'm just like, fuck this place. There's nothing here. It's a dead end, you know. And so I put in, I filed a 602, which is like a grievance or an appeal process thing. And I said, hey, you know, the parole board told me to go to DVI, Tracy, and I'd like to be transferred to Tracy to finish my vocational training. Back then, if the board told you to do something, CDC would comply. You know, if they say go to, you know, go to Mars and, you know, whatever. I mean, they had to send you where the parole board requested you to go. And so they granted my 602, and I went to Tracy in May of '89. But I remember before I left, I had a homeboy there, had a big Superman thing tattooed on his chest, Chili. And then I had hair back then, and I was young, you know, and I wore glasses, and I went through the chow line, and this little South Sider from San Diego, he loads up Chili's tray, and he goes, Superman. And he loads up my tray, and he goes, Clark Kent. You know, he gave us like double, triple issue of food, you know, And this black dude, you know, he gave him a scoop and he just looks at him, and the guy stuck his tray out like for more. And he goes, "Fuck you, that's all you get." And I was like, wow. And pretty disrespectful, you know. He used the N-word, you know. So I left about a week later, and I got my property in Tracy and turned on the news. They had a big fucking riot in New Folsom on B Yard right after I left. So a couple guys got killed, a lot of stabbings. So I skated out of that while being there, and it's pretty grateful for that. And so now I'm in Tracy. You know, they had a hobby shop there. There were some guys I knew there. Now it's 89. I've been in prison. I've been down like 10 years, you know. I had weight piles. Now we have, you know, I had Northerners, Southerners there. They just started letting Northerners back into that prison when I was there. But there was still a few stabbings once in a while in Tracy, but overall it was pretty mellow. They had a swimming pool. They had hobby. They had prison industry running, you know, 3 shifts, like 7 days a week. So it was a lot of money. And when you have a lot of money in the prison, that's money for guys to go to canteen, hobby, buy hobby materials, take care of their families, food sales, and, you know, for illegal shit, you know. Guys that want to use, they got money to do it, you know. So it was a jam-packed prison, you know. It was 89. They were just starting to get into they had built these prisons now. They have new prisons, and the prison guards union was getting stronger under I think Pete Wilson was getting elected governor, and tough on crime was just full blast now. So parole used to be in California. When you went out on parole, your parole officer was supposed to help you transition back into society, help you get work, whatever, counseling, food. Well, now you have prison guards becoming parole officers, and their allegiance is to their union and their brother prison guards. So their job became to violate your parole and get you back into prison. And, you know, I started seeing guys parole and come back, you know. And Tracy was getting full. They had the field house with a couple hundred guys in it. All the day rooms had beds in them. That's when I started noticing, you know, the prisons were filling up. I was like, fuck, man, this is kind of way out, you know. You know, I can't imagine being in Tracy back in the day when it was full blown just warfare. Because I heard stories of guys that were there when that was going on, and I mean, them dudes, you know, the NF would, you know, they'd stab you and kill you right in the hallway, right in front of the guards, you know. I heard a story, dude stabbed a dude up, killed him, and then walked over to K-Wing, which is a hole, and stood in front of the door, put his hands behind his back, you know, just like. So it was a it's a blessing being there without that shit going on. I got into hobby, you know. We had family visits. You know, the family visiting clerk signed you up for your family visits. So, you know, I was buying family visits and doing my thing, you know. I was involved with some illegal activity. I was on the weight pile, working in industry. I finished my mill and cabinet trade, and it was cool. Tracy was pretty cool. Then I went to board, and they're like, you know, we want you to go to do this program. I'm like, you know, I don't want to go do that program because it was at a CMC, and they said, well, we changed this program. It's now in Donovan, which was in San Diego, and that's where I'm from. So I went down to Donovan in '93 for a Category T program. I stayed there about 3.5 years. You know, I started working as a plumber. I did that program, and you know, I got into my, you know, now I'm in a prison with no hobby shop, just sell hobbies. So I got into my painting and tattooing, and you know, one of the guys I tattooed is now on death row, Todd, you know. So that's kind of a disappointing thing, you know, to see. He was a young dude, pretty cool. He got out, came back, and got involved with some shit and got himself sent to death row. But you know, Donovan was pretty kickback pin. You know, now I'm a little older, you know, now I'm starting, most of the guys around me are younger. And I started going to board, and they're just like, nah. You know, I had great evaluations out of this program, you know, recommendation I'd be paroled. And it's like, you know, we're going to deny your parole. I went to the board the last time there, and there was a guy who was a lieutenant in a San Diego police officer and police department, and another guy who was lieutenant in La Mesa Police, which is San Diego, and then a guy who was a lady who was a politician out of San Diego, you know, Republican. So, and it's like, it's a no-win situation, you know, and they knew about my case. I mean, they were cops when my case happened, you know, and that's when I just decided, you know, fuck this, man. I'm not getting out, you know.
What's it like when you go into the board? Is it like a panel of people that ask you questions?
Yeah, back then it was 3 people, you know. Now it's 2. They would have 2 commissioners and a deputy commissioner, and these 2 of these guys are cops. I mean, you know, and they're politically appointed. They're appointed by the governor, and so they go through your crime, you know, then your post conviction, and then, you know, any programs you've done, and then what your plans are for parole, and it's just you know, basically they just sit in there and fat mouth you and accuse you of stuff, and you know, they accuse you of, you know, oh, you killed this guy because you wanted to be a member of a motorcycle club, and that's not true. I'm like, that's not true. I mean, it's the same thing like I was explaining to you about my trial. You know, they bring in a witness that lied. They know he lied. They don't care. It's the same thing. Over the course of time in prison, people drop notes on you. You know, they snitch on you, write snitch kites. That's all in your confidential file. And so they'll go through that and pick and choose information they know it's not true, but they'll make accusations, and it's just like, or you get a letter of support from somebody. You have to get letters of support, job offers, and you know, they'll start making accusations against the people that send letters of support to you. And it's just like, man, what, you know, it's pretty obvious they have no intent on releasing you. And I remember I told them, you know, they would deny you 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. Back then it was a 3-year was the max they could deny you. I told them, hey, look, why don't you just give me a 3-year denial so I don't have to come back in here for 3 years? And they go, well, you know, just don't come. And so I went, I got in some trouble, you know. When I started realizing I wasn't going to get out of prison, you know, I divorced my wife. I said, hey, just go live your life. And she's like, all right, you know, but then she came back around and she's like, hey, let's get a family visit. Well, I was divorced, you know. You know, I don't want to keep her tied to a prison sentence with me, right? So so I'm all right, I put in for a family visit and I got it, you know. Then we had another one. And on the 3rd one, I had moved to another yard, and I sent her some money off my books. And my new counselor went through my file and found my divorce papers while I was on a family visit. And the goon squad came out. And a family visit is where you go out there with your wife, your mother, your children, brothers, sisters, immediate family for 48 hours. So, and you're in an apartment. There's food, you know, you buy food from the prison now. Back in the day, you could bring in your own food, all that stuff. So anyway, that last night there, the goon squad came out there and rolled me up, and you know, they're like, hey, if we had our way, we would just let you stay out here, but the warden called us to come roll you up. And at that time, they were talking about taking our family visits. So, and that's kind of the reason why I didn't want to try to get remarried and get family visits that way. So they rolled me up and wrote me up for falsifying a family visiting application. And I still had level 4 points, but I was there in a program. And so I got transferred to Corcoran from there. And for that, over that ride up, because I finished the program there, but I got to stay there as an emergency plumber. I was a plumber. I became an emergency plumber. You can get an override also for your job, and so they tried to keep me there, and they're like, man, I don't know what the fuck you did, but that warden's intent on getting you out of here, And so I went to Corcoran. I got another year denial there, and Corcoran was cool. I was there for a couple of years. It's kind of run old school, like if there was a stabbing, they would just lock down the race involved or the group involved and resume movement, And so right after I got there, they had a huge riot with the blacks and the Southsiders. And they were locked down for like 3 months. The only people they would let out were whites. So we had the kitchens, the tier tending, everything. It was only whites out. It was a fucking party, guys were just, we were partying, guys were making wine, getting loaded. We'd be 5, 6 guys in the cell partying, wrestling, having a great time. And then, then they let them out. They let everybody out back to normal. And there would be a stabbing on the yard, man, and they would just lock everybody up. Then the afternoon yard, they'd come out. They ran it kind of old school. Back in the day, if there was a murder, they'd just lock the prison down for a second and then resume program, And that's kind of how they ran Corcoran. At the time, they were investigating them in the SHU for all the fights and all that stuff they were doing back there. The FBI was investigating the prison, so they treated us pretty good on the main line.
I just had a guy fly out here who did 40 years in California State, and he spent some years in Corcoran. And he was telling me about the booty bandit of Corcoran, and he was telling me about the guards doing staged fights because he was a boxer, so they were putting money on him and all this stuff. Did you hear about all that stuff?
I heard about some of that stuff, but I never seen it. That, like the fights, that was before I got there, and that's why the feds were investigating them. But there were guys there that were there when that stuff was happening, and that stuff was happening. I did hear about some guy in the hole, some black dude. They would put dudes in his cell, and he would, like that part's true. Like if the guards get pissed off at somebody, they'd put him in a cell with that dude, and he'd beat him down and rape him.
I Googled it after I spoke to that guy, and there are news articles about the booty bandit of Corcoran people can Google, and about the stage fights, because people were getting killed, weren't they?
Yeah, that stuff's true. And there's a video I saw of a guy, in the SHU, they had the chessboard spray painted on the ground. They're playing chess, and the Hispanic dudes, guy got mad, slapped the dude he's playing chess with. And then several minutes went by and they shot the dude and killed him. I mean, back in the SHU, they would shoot you, any violence, they would shoot you. And the SHU yards back there are really small. So yeah, they were shooting people, they were staging fights. They would, in the SHU, they would they would release 4 or 5 black dudes and then release a white guy, or knowing it's on, right? Or they would take guys in the chow hall on the main line. I heard, I heard this numerous accounts of this from guys that were there when it's going on. They put guys in the chow hall and then, to fight, and they would bet on who would win. I mean, cops would bet on it. It was pretty. And these are supposed to be the guys that their job is to keep you in prison and keep the peace. So I mean, that shit that was going on.
They formed their own gang, didn't they? The guards.
Yeah, Corcoran had they were gang mentality, but the Green Wall actually came out of Salinas. It was Salinas Valley Prison. It's they built so many prisons. They got so big. They had 180,000 people in prison. So now prisons kind of changed. There's so many people. In the beginning, when the new prison started coming along, you had guys that been around in the 80s, 70s. In each prison, so things were kind of run. They had locked up all the gang members, but you had guys that knew how to do time. But now, once you get into the 2000s, it's or late 90s, it's all those guys that knew how to do time, that they weren't coming back to prison. You had guys that would parole, stay out for 3 or 4 or 5 years and then come back for 3 or 4 or 5 years. You know, they would stay out and then they would assume that, you know, doing certain crimes was worth the risk. The benefit was worth the risk. And every now and then they get caught, come back for a few years, leave. They were criminals, you know, gangsters, whatever. A lot of them were really good dudes. And, you know, some of them guys, like, they had skills. So they'd come to prison, work as carpenters, plumbers, electricians, you know, get on the inmate day labor crew. They know how to do their time. Well, those guys quit coming to prison. You know, you had the 3 strikes came out, severe penalties. So they just quit coming in. And I started noticing that all the guys I knew in prison, they were gone. You know, there were very few guys left that were around in the early 80s that, you know, when I first came in. And now I'm surrounded by guys that have an idea of how things were back then, but it's kind of twisted. It really wasn't the way they think it was, you know. And so they're trying to emulate what they think prison should be or what it was, and it really started fucking up the system. And then you know, the 3 strikes started giving guys, you know, prison time, sent to level 4 prisons that really were not that kind of guy, and they had life sentences for, you know, stealing a pair of Levi's or shoplifting some whiskey. And, you know, I was still involved with slinging a little bit of dope and partying. And, you know, I had a couple guys locked up that owed me $50. And I started looking around the yard and guys were just checking in. What happened to so-and-so? He checked in. And guys were walking around the yard with their chest out, you know. Next thing you know, they're gone. I'm like, what happened to that dude? Oh, he owed a bunch of money, so he's gone. Or we found out that dude was a fucking chomo. Or we found, you know, I was like, fuck, man. You know, by now I've been down like 15, 16 years. And so the guy that I was doing shit with, he got busted. Actually, I remember he sold this guy some dope. This kid had a lot of money. His dad, you know, big daddy, big money, 3 striker. He bought a bunch of speed, and he went to his cell and he papered up a bunch of speed and he wrote names on each paper. He was going to give a bunch of guys a paper dope, you know. And they rolled up on him in the chow hall and they thought he was stealing sugar, you know. And the cop put his hand in his jacket pocket and, what do you got in there? And he pulled out all these papers of dope with everybody's name on it. And they sent him to the hole. And the guy I was doing shit with, he had life without the possibility of parole. And he was just a hardcore dope fiend. And he was a wheeler dealer. And we were doing things together. So we were locked down. We come out for a shower. And he goes, yeah, that dude sent me a kite. He said, don't worry, I'm not going to tell on you. And I said, he's already told on you, Ricky. He goes, how do you know? I said, well, if I get busted and I go to the hole, you know, I don't have to send you a kite and tell you I'm not going to tell on you. You'll know I didn't tell on you because you won't get busted. They're not going to come fuck with you. He goes, wow. And sure enough, you know, they started searching his cell and they ended up taking him to the hole. And this is in 97, you know. And so I said, you know, all my friends are gone. And for us, dope was for partying and making money. I remember them guys told me, you know, if you're not making money and you're not having a good time and you're still fucking with it, then you're just a dope fiend like all the rest of these guys. I thought, you know, I'm not really having that much fun. I got to put guys in check. You know, guys owe you money. It was funny is like the Southsiders, other guys, they would pay you. And then white dudes are like, slow fuck you. And I got to go to work and say, hey, you know, if you don't pay me, I'm going to kill you. Why do I got to do that? You know, so I just said, I'm not having any fun. The money's too risky. I'm done, you know. And I went to my cell. I flushed a 1/4 ounce of crank. So I'm over it, you know. I remember my cell, he goes, man, I would have done that. I said, not in this cell. I'm over it, you know. And then became the you know, you could go to the yard and guys would be talking about dope, and I'd be like, yeah, I don't use. You know, and yeah, everybody uses dope in prison. You know, son of a bitch.
My battery's just gone. Just keep talking though. I'm just gonna replace it.
All right. Yeah, so everybody uses dope in prison. You're surrounded by dope fiends, you know. But yeah, I did like Corcoran. It was I enjoyed Corcoran. I remember one time my wife came to see me there, and yeah, there was a lot of stabbings there, and nobody ever got busted. I remember that. It's the last place I've been to where violence would happen and guys wouldn't get caught. And so when you go to the visiting room, you go down to a corner, you hit a button, it buzzes over and visit, and then they pop the gate and you could go out to your visit, you know. So I get down there with it. Some of the Southsiders had a little policy: pick up a Bible or a knife. So if a guy was involved with a church, they wouldn't really sweat him for, you know, be involved with the madness, you know. But this one guy was like bullying this old man, and he was walking around with a Bible during the day and then bully weaker guys. And so I remember I was down there, I pushed the button, you know, to go on my visit. I turned around and there's this dude stabbing this guy. I mean, right in front of the fucking program office. He just on it, just boom, boom, boom. He stabbed him like 25 times. And I remember I was, fuck, you know, I kept pushing that button, you know, for him to pop that gate so I could get out to my visit. And I got through the gate and I got to my visit, and then I heard the alarm on the yard. My lady's like, what's that? And I go, I told her, she's like, fuck, you know. But I mean, that's the mentality you develop after a while. I mean, there's a guy getting stabbed, you know, and you're just like, I want to go on my visit, you know, fucking, you know what I mean? Like, and there was a kid there too, Opie. He was in New Folsom with me, and it was always fucking on the verge of getting in a wreck, you know, over drugs. And I was a tier tender at the time, and so I would do my job in the building and then go out to the yard. And it's a new prison; they got a double gates, you know, go through the rotunda, you go out. They opened the gate on both gates, and Opie was coming in, and he had a knife sticking out his neck. He's like, Mitch, knife was sticking out about that far out of his neck. And I go, what's up, Opie? And he goes, they stabbed me in my neck. I was like, fuck, you know. But you know, so I go, well, fuck it. I went out to the yard. I figure, oh, we're gonna be locked down for a little bit on that. So I just jetted out the yard, found a grassy spot, and sat down. And, you know, the alarm went off, and I got a, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours a yard. I mean, that was Corcoran, you know. I mean, it was, and you know, the guys like that, guys were getting stabbed was usually because they owed a lot of money and they weren't paying, which I didn't mind, you know. And then, you know, I was like, you know, Corcoran didn't have any AA or NA, no hobby. I worked in the furniture, like a modular office furniture in a wood shop for a while. It was pretty cool. But I wanted a hobby. I wanted to get into my art and shit, you know. So I got transferred to Lancaster.
Mitch, I think I'm going to stop you here because we're at about 2 hours of content right now.
Yeah.
And I think we're halfway through your sentence.
Yeah.
What I'm going to suggest is we put this out as part one. I'll get Bruno back next Sunday.
Yeah.
And we can just keep going from there with part two if you're up for that.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Do you want to tell the viewers then how they can find your channel? We'll include the link in the description box below this video. Can you tell them how they can find your channel and support you and go to your Instagram and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, guys can find my channel at Hard Intentions on YouTube. And we also have a website, hardintentions.com. And I'm on Instagram, Mitch Smiley 790 on Instagram. People want to message, you know, I still do artwork and the like, you know. Yeah. So be cool to hear from people, get their response. And if anybody wants any, you know, artwork done, I can do that. Yeah.
So all of Mitch's links will be in the description box below this video. We're on an epic journey here of almost 4 decades in prison. You're a brilliant storyteller, Mitch, because I've hardly had to say anything, and that's ideal for me. I just sit here and listen to these stories. We're on the edge of our seats. It's such an epic journey. So please put in the comments what you thought about this. Like I said, all of Mitch's links are there if you want to reach out to him. Check out his art, subscribe to his channel. You know, we really appreciate people following through on the links that the guests give us, it incentivizes them to come back, and it's just, helps build this community. So let us know in the comments what you thought about this video, and huge thank you to Mitch for spending so much time with us. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
So if you enjoy true crime books, Gadfly Press is proud to announce the publication of Son of the Cali Cartel. You may have seen the Cali Cartel as represented on Narcos. A lot of that was BS. William lays it down in this book, what actually happened. The Cali Cartel, they took over from Pablo Escobar. They were the biggest cartel in the world, dealing billions and billions per year, US dollars. And the four heads out of the two most important ones were Miguel, which was William's dad, and his brother, Gilberto. When Miguel went to prison and Gilberto went to prison, William was running the cartel. Could you imagine running a multi-billion-dollar cartel? And the DEA, war on drugs, they made them public enemy number one. William got shot up in an assassination attempt in a restaurant. The book starts out with that story. His mates got murdered, and he just barely made it out alive. So if you want to check it out, it's available worldwide on Amazon as an ebook, audiobook, and paperback. And the link is in the description box below this video. Cheers. Enjoy the podcast.